It is the year 1442, in the county of Norfolk, England. The autumn mist settles gently over the fields and manor houses of East Anglia. We are about to enter the world of the Pastons, a family of remarkable ambition, navigating the complexities of 15th century life through their words, their struggles, and their dreams. Our story begins not with grand nobility, but with a man named William Paston, who would lay the foundation for everything to come. William Paston was born a peasant son in the village of Paston, near the North Sea coast. But William possessed something that would change his family's fortunes forever, an exceptional mind and an unwavering determination to rise. Through years of study, he became a lawyer, then a sergeant at law, and eventually a justice. He married Agnes Barry, a woman of good family, and together they began to build something remarkable, not just wealth, but a legacy. Let us imagine a quiet morning at one of their manors. The sun has barely risen. In the great hall, the embers of last night's fire still glow faintly. A servant moves silently, laying fresh rushes on the floor, their sweet herbal scent mingling with wood smoke. Agnes Paston rises early, as she always does. She is a woman of considerable capability, managing estates, overseeing servants, arranging marriages, and ensuring her family's position remains secure. Her days are never idle. She descends the wooden stairs, her keys jangling softly at her belt, those keys that symbolize her authority over the household stores, the linens, the spices locked away in carved chests. In the kitchen, the day's bread is already being prepared. The cook and her helpers have been awake since before dawn. Flour dusts their hands as they knead the dough with rhythmic, practiced movements. The scent of baking will soon fill the manor. William Paston, in his chamber, is already at work. Even in these early hours, there are documents to review, letters to compose, legal matters to consider. His quill scratches softly across parchment. He pauses occasionally, thinking, then continues. The Pastons are always writing letters. To friends, to family, to those who owe them loyalty or whom they need to influence. These letters will survive the centuries, hundreds of them, giving us this intimate glimpse into their lives. By the time the household gathers for the morning meal, the manor is fully awake. The chaplain has said morning prayers in the chapel. The steward has received his instructions for the day. Tenant farmers have arrived with reports of the harvest. The Pastons have several estates now, acquired through careful legal work, strategic marriages, and William's service to powerful lords. Each property requires attention. Each brings both income and complications. At the table, conversation is purposeful. Agnes discusses a dispute with a neighbor over boundary stones. William mentions a letter he must send to a contact in London. Their children listen, learning the intricate dance of maintaining and advancing a family's position. This is not the life of great earls or dukes. This is something perhaps more remarkable, a family climbing, step by careful step, from peasant origins toward gentility. Every decision matters. Every alliance must be considered. Every slight must be remembered. Every favor returned. After the meal, Agnes walks through her gardens. Hey, herbs grow for cooking and medicine. Sage, rosemary, feverfew, chamomile. She inspects them with a practiced eye, noting what needs harvesting, what needs tending. A servant approaches with a question about the brewing of ale. Another needs instruction about preparing a chamber for expected guests. Agnes handles each matter with calm efficiency. This is her domain, and she governs it well. Meanwhile, William rides out to inspect one of the family's properties. His horse moves at an easy pace along the rutted road. He notes the condition of the fields, the state of the cottages, whether repairs are needed to fences or barns. He stops to speak with a tenant, listening to concerns about drainage in the lower field. William makes a note. These details matter. A well-managed estate provides income. Income provides security. Security allows advancement. This is the rhythm of their days. Not filled with dramatic events, but with the constant, careful work of building something lasting. The Pastons understand that their rise must be consolidated, defended, expanded with patience and persistence. As the morning progresses, the life of the manor continues in its steady rhythm. In the solar, the private family chamber warmed by its southern exposure, Agnes Paston sits with her daughters and the household women, their needles moving in quiet unison. They are working on altar cloths for the parish church, their stitches small and precise. This is devotional work, but it is also practical. The Pastons' generosity to the church must be visible, remembered. Piety and reputation walk hand in hand. One of the younger women hums softly, then stops, remembering that silence is more appropriate. Agnes glances up briefly, says nothing, and returns to her work. The correction is understood without words. Outside, in the courtyard, the normal business of a manor estate unfolds. A blacksmith repairs tools, his hammer ringing steadily against the anvil. The rhythm is almost musical, a counterpoint to the softer sounds within the house. Chickens scratch in the date. A boy carries water from the well, the bucket swinging slightly as he walks. A cart arrives with timber from one of the Paston woodlands, and the steward moves forward to inspect the delivery, checking each load against what was promised. These are the threads from which a family's fortune is woven. Timber sold in Norwich, wool from their flocks sent to market, rents collected from tenants, court fees earned from William's legal practice. Each stream of income carefully managed, accounted for, protected. In his chamber, William sets aside his legal documents and takes up a different letter. This one is to his eldest son, John, who is away studying. Education is the foundation upon which William built everything, and he is determined his children will have even better opportunities than he created for himself. The letter is both affectionate and instructive. William writes about matters at home, about properties and prospects, but he also reminds John to attend to his studies, to make useful connections, to remember that everything they have achieved can be lost through carelessness or complacency. William's own father was called a good plain husbandman. Within one generation, William transformed that legacy. But he knows that nobility have long memories, and some still whisper about the Paston's origins. His children must be beyond reproach, educated, connected, worthy of the gentility they claim. The afternoon brings a visitor. A neighboring gentleman arrives on horseback, accompanied by 2 servants. The Paston's porter announces him, and William comes down to greet him in the hall. Such visits are part of the delicate web of local relationships. This neighbor needs William's legal advice on a matter of inheritance. In return, he brings news from other parts of the county, information about who is rising, who is falling, which families are arranging marriages. They sit by the fire, speaking in measured tones. Wine is brought. Agnes joins them briefly, exchanging courtesies, then withdraws. This is men's business, though she will hear every detail later and add her own shrewd assessment. Information is currency in this world. Knowing which lord is in favor with the king, which knight is in financial difficulty, which heiress will soon need a husband, these things can make the difference between opportunity and obscurity. As the afternoon light begins to slant through the manor's narrow windows, Agnes walks through the storerooms, conducting her regular inspection. Here are barrels of salted fish for the winter months, sacks of grain, wheels of cheese aging on shelves, bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters. She pauses at the locked chest that holds the valuable spices, pepper, cinnamon, ginger, costly items brought from distant lands, used sparingly for important occasions. She checks that the lock is secure, that the inventory she keeps in her head matches what she sees. A good household runs on order and vigilance. Waste must be prevented. Theft must be deterred. Everything must be in its proper place. In the chapel, the chaplain is reading his office, his voice a quiet murmur of Latin prayers. The Pastons maintain their own priest, as befits their status. He says Mass daily, tutors the younger children, and serves as the family secretary for the most confidential correspondence. The chapel is simple but well kept, with a painted screen and good quality vestments. The Paston's coat of arms is displayed here, arms they have claimed as their right, though some question their entitlement to such symbols of gentility. But possession, maintained long enough, becomes legitimacy. The Pastons understand this. They display their arms, they act as gentlefolk, and slowly, year by year, their status becomes more difficult to challenge. As evening approaches, the household prepares for supper. This is the main meal of the day, and though the Pastons are not great nobles, they maintain proper standards. The trestle tables are set up in the hall. Servants bring bread, pottage, roasted meat, and ale. William and Agnes take their places at the high table. The household arranges itself by rank, senior servants closer to the family, junior ones further away. A chaplain says grace, his blessing floating over the assembled company. They eat without haste, conversing quietly. William mentions the visitors' news. Agnes shares a letter received from a cousin. Plans are discussed, adjusted, refined. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new opportunities, new letters to write and receive. This is their life, not filled with tournaments or royal audiences, but with the patient, persistent work of maintaining and improving their position. Each day is another thread in the fabric they are weaving, a fabric meant to endure for generations. After supper, as darkness settles fully over Norfolk, the household begins to quiet. Servants bank the fires. Candles are snuffed out to save precious wax. The manor settles into the peaceful sounds of night. William and Agnes retire to their chamber. Tomorrow will be much like today. Letters to write, estates to manage, relationships to nurture, positions to defend. This is the reality of an ambitious family in the 15th century. And somewhere in the night, across the dark fields and quiet villages of Norfolk, other families sleep and wake and work toward their own dreams, each one part of the vast, intricate tapestry of medieval England. The years pass with their seasons. William Paston continues his careful work, but time moves forward for every family, and by 1444, changes are coming to the Paston household. William and Agnes's eldest son, John, has completed his education. He has studied law like his father, learning not just the intricacies of property and inheritance, but the art of navigating the complex world of 15th century England. Now, at around 22 years of age, he must take his place in the family's advancement. But first, there is the matter of marriage. For a family like the Pastons, marriage is never merely about affection. It is about alliance, property, and connections. John must marry well, and his parents have been carefully considering the possibilities. Margaret Mortby is the daughter of a prosperous gentleman, and more importantly, she stands to inherit valuable estates. Her family is established, respectable. This would be an excellent match for the Pastons, bringing property and further legitimizing their claim to gentle status. Negotiations take time. Letters pass back and forth between families, between lawyers, between friends who can offer insights into character and circumstances. Every detail must be examined, the extent of Margaret's inheritance, the terms of the marriage settlement, what happens if there are no children, what provisions exist for widowhood. Agnes is deeply involved in these discussions. She knows that her son's wife will one day manage Paston properties as she does now. The young woman must be capable, sensible, able to handle the endless complexities of estate management and family business. The marriage is agreed upon, the contract signed and sealed. In 1440, John Paston and Margaret Mortby are wed. It is a good match, securing properties and connections that will serve the family well in the years ahead. Margaret comes to live in the Paston household, learning from Agnes the rhythms of managing a gentle family's affairs. She is young, but she proves herself capable and diligent. She writes clearly, thinks practically, and understands what is required of her. The early years of John and Margaret's marriage are busy ones. Margaret gives birth to their first child, and then more children follow. The nursery becomes a lively place, filled with the sounds of infants and the careful attention of nurses and servants. But this is not a time when parents and children share the intimate closeness we might expect today. The children are cared for by nurses, taught by tutors, raised to understand their duties to the family. Affection exists, but it is tempered by the practical realities of their world. William Paston, growing older now, continues his work but begins to think more about legacy. He has acquired properties throughout Norfolk. He has raised his family from peasant origins to gentility. But he knows that what has been built must be defended, and his sons must be prepared for that task. He drafts his will with meticulous care, specifying exactly how his properties should be divided, what provisions should be made for Agnes, what responsibilities each son must bear. Nothing is left to chance. Even in death, William Paston plans for his family's future. In 1444, William Paston dies. He has lived to see his family's transformation, but now the weight of everything he built falls to his sons, particularly to John, the eldest. The funeral is appropriate to his status, a gentleman justice, a man of property and influence. Masses are said for his soul. Alms are distributed to the poor. The family gathers in mourning, but also in awareness that life must continue, and the work of maintaining the Paston position never stops. Agnes, now a widow, does not retire into obscurity. She continues to manage properties, to advise her sons, to involve herself in family decisions. Widowhood brings her even greater authority, and she uses it with the same practical determination she has always shown. John Paston now finds himself at the center of the family's affairs. He is responsible for multiple estates, for maintaining relationships with the powerful lords of Norfolk, for defending the family's claims to properties that others may covet. And this is where the real challenges begin. The England of the 1440s and 1450s is becoming increasingly unstable. The king, Henry VI, is pious but weak. Great lords compete for power and influence. Local disputes can quickly escalate into violence. The Pastons, having risen so far, now find themselves vulnerable. They are wealthy enough to be envied, but not powerful enough to be unassailable. Their claims to certain properties are legally sound but can still be challenged by those with greater force. Margaret, now fully the lady of the household, takes on increasing responsibilities. When John must be away in London on legal business or attending to matters at court, it is Margaret who manages the estates, who deals with the tenants, who keeps watch for threats. And Margaret writes to John constantly. Her letters are detailed, practical, full of information about crops and tenants and local politics. But they also reveal her concerns, her loneliness when he is away, her need for his guidance on difficult decisions. Right worshipful husband, she writes, beginning with the formal courtesy of the age. Then she tells him about repairs needed to one of the manors, about a dispute with a neighbor, about rumors she has heard of someone seeking to challenge their title to a property. The letters flow back and forth, carrying news, instructions, reassurances. In an age before telephones or rapid travel, letters are the threads that hold separated families together. Life at the manor continues its rhythm even amid these concerns. The seasons turn, plowing and planting in spring, harvesting in autumn, the quiet work of winter when accounts are settled and plans are made for the year ahead. Margaret walks through the property on a mild afternoon, her cloak pulled close against the breeze. She inspects the dovecot, where pigeons are raised for eggs and meat. She checks on the fish ponds, ensuring they are properly maintained. She speaks with the bailiff about which field should lie fallow next year. These are not glamorous tasks, but they are essential. The wealth that supports the Paston's gentle lifestyle comes from careful management of land and resources. Every detail matters. Every decision affects the family's income and security. In the distance, she can see the parish church where William Paston is buried, where prayers are said for his soul and for all the Paston dead. The family is becoming rooted here, generation by generation, their names carved in stone and recorded in documents. Margaret turns back toward the manor house, thinking of the letter she must write to John this evening. There's always news to share, always matters requiring his attention or approval. Their partnership, conducted largely through written words, is the foundation on which the family's fortunes now rest. The 1450s bring both opportunity and peril to the Paston family. England is entering a time of political turbulence that will eventually be known as the Wars of the Roses, though no one living through these years yet knows that name. For families like the Pastons, navigating these troubled waters requires constant vigilance. Choosing the right patron, supporting the right faction, maintaining good relationships with powerful neighbors, these decisions can mean the difference between prosperity and ruin. John Paston has become closely connected to Sir John Fastolfe, an aging knight who served with distinction in the French wars and accumulated enormous wealth. Fastolfe owns multiple manors and castles, including the great fortress of Caister in Norfolk, with its thick walls and commanding towers. Fastolf has no legitimate children, and he relies increasingly on John Paston for legal advice and estate management. This relationship brings John into proximity to greater wealth and status than the Pastons have ever known. But it also draws them into complications that will haunt the family for decades. At home, Margaret continues her work. On a spring morning, she rises early and goes to the manor kitchen, where the cook is preparing the day's meals. They discuss what provisions are available, what needs to be purchased at market, whether they should slaughter one of the pigs for salting. Margaret is pregnant again. This seems to be her constant state during these years. Each pregnancy carries its dangers, but she manages the household throughout, her authority never wavering. The children need raising, the servants need directing, the estates need tending, whether she feels well or not. One of the Paston children, perhaps young John, the eldest son, or his brother also named John, is learning his letters in the solar. The family tutor, a clerk in minor orders, guides the boy's hand across the parchment, teaching him to form the letters that will become the tools of family business. Again, the tutor says gently, "Remember, a gentleman must write clearly. Your letters will represent you when you cannot be present yourself." The boy concentrates, his tongue caught between his teeth, carefully forming each stroke. Education is never wasted. Every Paston child will learn to read and write, to calculate, to understand the law and business that sustains them. News arrives that troubles the household. A powerful local lord, Lord Mullanes, has laid claim to one of the Paston manors at Gresham. His claim is weak in law, but law matters less when backed by armed men. Margaret writes urgently to John, who is in London. "Right worshipful husband, I recommend me to you, praying you to know that I have received your letter. And as for the matter at Gresham, Lord Mullane's men have been making threats. They speak openly that they will have the manor, whatever the law may say." John writes back with instructions. Margaret must hold the property, keep their own men there, not yield to intimidation. But these are frightening words for a woman managing a household while her husband is far away. Days pass in uneasy peace. Then, on a winter day in 1448, Lord Mullane's men arrive in force, perhaps 1,000 strong, armed and determined. They surround the manor at Gresham. Margaret is not there, fortunately. She is at another Paston property, but the Paston servants and tenants are trapped inside. The attackers break down the doors, smash windows, loot the house. They carry away goods, destroy documents, and drive out everyone inside. When Margaret hears the news, she is horrified but not paralyzed. She immediately writes to John with every detail she can gather. Who was involved? What was taken? Which neighbors witnessed the attack? She is already thinking of how they will pursue justice, how they will reclaim what was stolen. "They have taken our goods to the value of 200 pounds or more," she writes. "They have broken our chests and coffers, taken away our deeds and evidence, and say openly they will hold the manor by force. Husband, you must seek remedy at law, for we cannot withstand such violence alone." John does seek remedy. He files suits. He appeals to the king's justices. He uses every legal tool available. But justice moves slowly, and those with powerful friends can delay proceedings for years. Meanwhile, life continues. The Pastons cannot afford to focus solely on one dispute, no matter how outrageous. There are other properties to manage, other children to raise, other relationships to maintain. On a quiet summer evening, Margaret sits in the garden of their Norwich house. The city is busy beyond the walls, merchants closing their shops, apprentices finishing their work, servants drawing water from wells. But hey, for a moment, there is peace. She is mending a shirt by the fading light, her needle moving in practiced rhythm. One of her younger children plays nearby, building something elaborate from sticks and stones, narrating an imaginary adventure. Margaret glances up occasionally, watching the child with an expression that might be affection, though she would never let such feelings interfere with proper discipline. Children must learn their place, their duties. Love is shown through preparation for the world, not through softness. A servant approaches with news that John will return from London within a few days. Margaret nods, already mentally preparing. There will be much to discuss: the ongoing dispute over Gresham, other legal matters, decisions about the children's education and future marriages. As darkness settles over Norwich, the household prepares for the night. Shutters are closed against the cooling air. Candles are lit sparingly. In the kitchen, the fire is banked to keep coals alive until morning. Margaret climbs the stairs to her chamber. Tomorrow she will write another letter. There's always another letter to write. She will check the account books, speak with the steward about repairs needed to one of the tenements they own in the city, perhaps visit the market to assess the prices of wool and grain. This is her life now, a constant balancing of domestic management and business affairs, of motherhood and estate administration. She has become indispensable to the family's functioning, John's true partner in maintaining everything his father built. As she lies in the darkness, perhaps she thinks of John traveling the roads back from London. She thinks of the children sleeping in their chambers. She thinks of the disputed manor at Gresham, sitting empty now, claimed by those who have no right to it. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new letters, new decisions. But tonight, there is rest. The house is quiet. The city sleeps beyond the walls. And in the darkness, the Paston family endures, as determined as ever to hold what they have claimed and to pass it on, secured and increased, to the next generation. The year 1459 arrives with its own troubles and complexities. Sir John Fastolfe, now very old and increasingly frail, spends much of his time at his manor of Caister, that imposing castle by the sea. John Paston visits him regularly, attending to legal matters and estate business. Fastolfe has grown to trust John deeply, perhaps more than his own relatives. He speaks often of his will, of how his vast properties should be distributed after his death. John listens carefully, takes notes, offers advice. This relationship has become central to the Paston family's hopes for advancement. But these are delicate matters. Other men circle Fastolfe too, hoping for bequests, angling for advantage. Everyone knows the old knight cannot live much longer, and his wealth will transform whoever inherits it. At home, Margaret manages an ever-growing household. The Paston children are reaching ages where their futures must be planned. The eldest sons will need to establish themselves in law or service to great lords. Daughters will need advantageous marriages arranged. Margaret writes to John about their son, young John, who is away at Cambridge. I pray you send him money for his expenses, for the master writes that he does well in his studies but needs funds for books and his commons. Even education must be carefully budgeted, expenses tracked. She continues, and as for your daughter Anne, she is now of an age where we must think seriously of her marriage. Several families have made inquiries. I await your guidance on which suits we should encourage. Every decision requires consultation between husband and wife, even when separated by many miles. Their letters are the lifeline of family governance. In the manor courtyard on an autumn afternoon, the harvest is being tallied. Wagons arrive laden with grain from Paston fields. The bailiff checks each load, making marks on his tally stick, while Margaret observes from the hall entrance. This year's harvest will determine what rents can be collected, what surplus can be sold, how comfortable the winter will be. Margaret notes everything: which fields produced well, which tenants met their obligations, where there were shortfalls. A messenger arrives, mud-splattered from hard riding. He carries a letter from John in London. Margaret breaks the seal, her eyes scanning the familiar handwriting quickly. There is news of political developments, the growing tensions between the Duke of York and the King's supporters, shifting alliances among the great lords. These distant power struggles have immediate consequences for families like the Pastons. The wrong patron, the wrong alliance, could mean disaster. Yet neutrality is often impossible. One must choose, and choose wisely. As winter settles over Norfolk, the pace of life slows but never stops entirely. This is the season for indoor work, spinning and weaving, making candles, repairing tools and harnesses, settling accounts. Margaret sits with her household women in the solar, where brazier keeps the worst of the cold at bay. They work wool into thread, their fingers moving with practiced efficiency. One of the women tells a story, something about a knight and a dragon, or perhaps a saint and a miracle. The words flow softly, punctuated by the gentle whir of the spinning wheels. These are rare moments of relative ease, though even here Margaret's mind is partly elsewhere, thinking of letters she must write, decisions she must make, problems she must solve. The Christmas season brings its own rhythms. The Pastons observe the holy days with appropriate ceremony, masses in the chapel, alms for the poor, feasting for the household. For a few days, The usual business of estate management gives way to celebration and devotion. The great hall is decorated with holly and ivy. A Yule log burns in the massive fireplace. The household gathers for meals that are more elaborate than usual: roasted fowl, pies filled with spiced meat, sweetmeats made with precious honey and dried fruits. But even during the holy season, letters arrive and must be answered. Business does not entirely stop for Christmas. There are always matters requiring attention, always threats to be monitored, always opportunities to be considered. January 1460 brings cold winds and frozen ground. Life turns inward during these darkest weeks. The household rises late and retires early, conserving candles and firewood. The days are short, and there is a sense of waiting, for spring, for warmth, for the world to wake again. Margaret receives word that John will remain in London through the winter. Parliament is sitting, and there is legal business that keeps him in the city. She reads his letter by candlelight, then folds it carefully and adds it to the growing collection she keeps in a locked chest. These letters are precious to her, not just for their practical information, but as tangible connections to her absent husband. She rereads them sometimes, tracing the familiar shapes of his handwriting, hearing his voice in the formal phrases. She takes up her own quill to reply. Right worshipful and well-beloved husband, I recommend me unto you, desiring heartily to hear of your welfare, thanking God for your amending of the great disease that you have had. And I thank you for the letter that you sent me. For by my troth my mother and I were not at ease from the time that we knew of your sickness until we knew truly of your amending. The letter continues with practical matters: repairs needed to a barn, a dispute between two tenants, inquiries about a servant's wages. But underneath the business, there is genuine concern, genuine partnership. By February, everyone is eager for winter to release its grip. The stored food is running lower. The household is weary of salt fish and dried peas. They long for fresh greens, for the first eggs of spring, for sunshine strong enough to truly warm the bones. Margaret walks through the manor on a day when weak sunshine breaks through the clouds. She inspects the stores remaining, calculating what will be needed to see them through to the spring planting. There is enough, but not abundantly. It will be a relief when the season turns. In the chapel, the priest says his daily offices, his voice a comforting constant through the changing seasons. The Pastons have endowed masses for their dead, for William, for other family members, for all Christian souls. These prayers rise daily like incense, a spiritual investment in eternity. As evening falls, Margaret sits by the fire with her account books. She checks figures, makes notes about what must be done when spring comes. There are fields to plow, repairs to make, rents to collect, wool to shear and sell. The life of a gentlewoman in the 15th century is not one of idle luxury. It requires constant work, constant attention, constant decision-making. Margaret has proven herself more than equal to these demands. Outside, the winter night deepens over Norfolk. In cottages and manor houses across the county, other families settle by their fires, tending their own concerns, pursuing their own ambitions, living their own quiet dramas. And in London, in a rented room near the Inns of Court, John Paston perhaps also sits by firelight, reading legal documents or drafting letters. The distance between husband and wife is measured in days of hard travel, but their thoughts reach toward each other across the miles. November 1459 brings a moment that will reshape the Paston family's future. Sir John Fastolfe, after long years of declining health, dies at his castle of Caister. He is buried with ceremony appropriate to a knight who served his king in France and amassed a fortune in land and gold. But Sir John's death opens a question that will plague the Pastons for decades. What did he truly intend in his will? Multiple versions exist, drafted at different times, with different beneficiaries. John Paston claims that Fastolfe made him the principal executor and left him significant properties, including the great castle of Caister itself. Others dispute this. Fastolfe's relatives, other executors, even the church, all have their own claims and interpretations. What should have been the Pastons' greatest triumph becomes instead a legal and political quagmire that will consume John's energy for years to come. Margaret, hearing the news at home, understands immediately the implications. She writes to John, "I pray you take good counsel before you proceed in this matter, for there will be many who envy such an inheritance, and they will seek by all means to prevent you from enjoying it." Her advice is shrewd, but John is already committed. He believes Fastolf intended him to have these properties, and he will defend that claim. For a family that has spent generations climbing toward gentility, this inheritance represents a transformative leap, if it can be secured. The early months of 1460 find John immersed in legal battles over Fastolf's estate. He attends courts, consults with lawyers, drafts petitions, seeks the support of powerful lords who might intervene on his behalf. It is exhausting, expensive, and uncertain work. Meanwhile, Margaret must manage everything at home. With John consumed by the Fastolf inheritance, she becomes even more essential to the family's functioning. She oversees not just their original properties, but now attempts to manage some of Fastolf's lands as well. Spring arrives with its usual demands. Fields must be plowed and planted. Sheep must be sheared, their wool cleaned and prepared for market. Buildings need repairs after winter's damage. Tenants come with their complaints and requests. Margaret rides out to one of the manors, accompanied by servants. She meets with the bailiff, walking through the fields, assessing the work being done. The bailiff explains which fields will be planted with wheat, which with barley, where they will graze the cattle. She asks pointed questions. Why was this fence not repaired as instructed? Where are the accounts for last quarter sales? Has the tenant in the eastern cottage paid his rent? The bailiff answers carefully, knowing that Lady Margaret misses very little. These inspections are not merely ceremonial. Margaret needs to know the true state of each property, what income it can produce, what expenses it requires. The family's finances are complex, and every source of income must be protected and maximized. On market day in Norwich, Margaret sends her steward to observe prices and gather information. What is wool fetching this season? What about grain? Are prices rising or falling? This intelligence shapes decisions about when to sell, what to store, how to plan for the coming months. The steward returns with his report, and Margaret listens carefully, making mental notes. She will include this information in her next letter to John, for even amid his legal battles, he needs to know how their properties are performing. But the family faces more than just business concerns. England itself is sliding towards civil war. The political tensions that have simmered for years are coming to a boil. Great lords are raising armies. Old grievances are being settled with swords rather than lawsuits. In July 1460, a battle is fought at Northampton. The Duke of York's forces defeat the King's army and capture King Henry VI himself. The political landscape shifts dramatically, and families like the Pastons must quickly assess what this means for their own allegiances and safety. News reaches Norfolk slowly, carried by travelers and merchants. Margaret hears rumors first, then more reliable reports. She writes urgently to John, "I pray you send me word how the world goes with you, for we hear many strange tidings here in the country." John's reply, when it comes, is cautious. He advises Margaret to be vigilant, to ensure their properties are well guarded, to maintain good relations with their neighbors regardless of which faction those neighbors support. In such times, survival requires careful neutrality, or at least the appearance of it. As autumn approaches, the Pastons have another concern. Their eldest son, also named John but often called John II to distinguish him from his father, is now in his late teens. He must begin to make his way in the world, to establish himself as a gentleman worthy of the Paston name. Young John is sent to serve in a noble household, as is customary for young men of gentle birth. There he will learn courtly manners, make useful connections, and demonstrate the family status. But he proves to be something of a disappointment to his practical, hard-working parents. Margaret writes to her husband about their son's expenses. He writes constantly asking for money, for fine clothes, for horses, for entertainments. I fear he does not understand that our wealth must be carefully managed, not spent on frivolities. John Paston the elder is even more frustrated. He writes sharp letters to his son, reminding him that everything the family has achieved came through hard work and careful management, not through wasteful display. But young John seems more interested in tournaments and fashion than in the grinding business of estate management. On a quiet October evening, Margaret sits in the solar as darkness falls. A single candle illuminates the letter she is writing to John. The household is settled for the night. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, then falls silent. "Right worshipful husband," she writes, "I recommend me to you. I have spoken with the bailiff at Mordby, and he reports that the harvest there was good. Thanks be to God. But I am troubled by news from Caister. Some say that others are preparing to challenge our possession of the castle. I pray you, take counsel on this matter, for I fear we may face opposition from those who are more powerful than ourselves." She pauses, her quill hovering over the parchment. There is so much more she could say. Her worries about their son, her fatigue from managing everything alone, her longing for John to return home. But these are not things easily put into formal letters. Instead, she keeps to practical matters. "The children are all well, thanks be to God. I have sent your daughter's measurements to the tailor as you requested, and I have received the money you sent for household expenses, for which I thank you heartily. No more at this time, but God have you in his keeping. Written at Norwich on the eve of All Saints. By yours, M. Paston." She seals the letter carefully, pressing the Paston seal into the warm wax. Tomorrow a messenger will carry it to London. One more thread in the constant communication that binds the family together across distance. November brings the first hard frosts. Smoke rises from every chimney in Norwich as households prepare for winter. The market slows as the season turns inward. Margaret ensures that the Paston properties are ready, stores laid in, buildings secured against the weather, firewood stacked high. In the evening, she sits with her younger children by the fire. One of them reads aloud from a book of saints' lives, practicing the literacy that marks them as gentry. Margaret listens with half her attention, the other half already planning tomorrow's tasks. This is her life, an endless cycle of management and planning, of letters written and received, of decisions made and consequences managed. She is partner, manager, mother, and the foundation upon which the family's daily existence rests. And through it all, she endures, as the Pastons have always endured, with patience, determination, and an unshakable commitment to preserving what they have built. The year 1461 brings upheaval to all of England. In the frozen fields of Towton, on a day of driving snow, the bloodiest battle ever fought on English soil determines the fate of the kingdom. The Duke of York's son, Edward, defeats the forces of King Henry VI and claims the throne as King Edward IV. For the Pastons, far from the battlefield, this distant violence means uncertainty. Which lords will rise? Which will fall? Who will have the king's favor now? Every family with property and ambition must recalculate their position in this new political landscape. John Paston navigates these treacherous waters with care. He seeks the patronage of rising men while trying not to alienate those who might yet return to power. It is exhausting work, requiring constant attention to shifting alliances and the moods of the powerful. But the Fastolf inheritance remains his greatest preoccupation. Other claimants grow more aggressive, and now one enemy rises above all others in threatening the Pastons' position. The Duke of Norfolk, one of the most powerful men in the realm. The Duke wants Caister Castle. Perhaps he believes he has a legitimate claim, or perhaps he simply desires its strategic position and symbolic value. Whatever his reasoning, he is not a man easily denied, and the Pastons are not nearly powerful enough to resist him openly. Margaret receives troubling news at home. The Duke's men have been asking questions in the surrounding villages, making it clear that they consider the Pastons' possession of Caister to be temporary. She writes immediately to John with this intelligence. "Husband, I am told that the Duke of Norfolk has said openly that he will have Caister, whatever the law may say. I pray you seek counsel from those who are wise in such matters, for we cannot stand alone against such a great lord." John's response is resolute but worried. They must hold their ground legally while seeking powerful allies who might protect their interests. But allies are expensive and uncertain. Every great lord wants something in return for his protection. Spring 1461 brings the usual agricultural rhythms, but everything feels more precarious now. Margaret oversees the planting at their various manors, but she wonders how secure any of it truly is. If they lose the legal battles, if powerful enemies decide to take what they want by force, what can the Pastons really do? Yet life must continue. Crops must be planted. Children must be raised and educated. Marriages must be arranged. The family cannot simply stop because the future is uncertain. Everyone's future is always uncertain. Margaret's younger children are growing. They need clothes, education, discipline, and guidance. She attends to these matters with the same practical determination she brings to estate management. Each child represents the family's future, another branch of the Paston tree that must be properly cultivated. One afternoon, she sits with her daughter Marjorie, teaching her the skills she will need as a wife and household manager. They review accounts together, and Margaret explains how to calculate what stores will be needed for winter, how to manage servants, how to ensure nothing is wasted. Remember, Margaret tells her daughter, a household is like a ship. If the captain does not pay attention to every detail, it will founder. You must know what is in your storerooms, what your servants are doing, what your tenants owe. Nothing can be left to chance. Marjorie listens dutifully, though her mind may be partly on other things, perhaps on the husband who will eventually be chosen for her, on the life that awaits beyond her mother's careful supervision. In London, John Paston the younger, that somewhat frivolous eldest son, is beginning to mature, though not in ways his parents entirely approve. He has developed a taste for courtly life, for the tournaments and pageantry of the New Yorkist court. He writes home asking for money to purchase armor and fine horses. His father writes back with exasperation, I sent you to court to make useful connections and learn the ways of great men, not to spend money we can ill afford on display. But young John is not entirely idle. He is making connections, and some of them may prove valuable. He befriends other young gentlemen, learns the latest news from court, begins to understand how power operates at the highest levels. Perhaps, in his own way, he is serving the family's interests. Summer brings warmth and longer days. At the Paston Manors, the sheep are shorn and the wool prepared for market. This is one of the family's most important sources of income. English wool is prized across Europe, and good management of their flocks can mean the difference between a profitable year and a difficult one. Margaret watches the shearing, noting the quality of the fleeces. She asks the shepherd about each animal, about which ewes produce the best lambs, which rams should be kept for breeding. These details matter, and she refuses to leave such decisions entirely to servants. In the solar, away from the summer heat, she sits with her women doing delicate embroidery. They are working on a set of church vestments, another donation to ensure the Pastons are remembered in prayers, another visible sign of their piety and wealth. One of the women softly hums a melody, then catches herself and falls silent. Margaret glances up but says nothing. The needles continue their quiet work, in and out, creating beauty from simple thread and fabric. August brings news that troubles the family deeply. There are renewed challenges to their possession of some of the Fastolf properties. Legal proceedings drag on, consuming money and energy. John writes that he must remain in London longer than planned, attending to these matters. Margaret reads his letter with growing concern. How long can they sustain these legal battles? How much will it cost? And what if, after everything, they lose? The thought is almost unbearable, to have come so close to such wealth and status, only to have it snatched away. She walks through the Norwich house, checking rooms, observing servants at their work. Everything here is orderly, well managed, under control. But beyond these walls, forces move that she cannot control. Great lords pursuing their own interests, courts rendering judgments, political factions rising and falling. At night, lying in bed, she sometimes allows herself to worry. What will become of her children if the family's fortunes decline? What marriages can be made if their reputation is damaged? What future awaits them if the careful work of 2 generations is undone? But morning always comes, and with it the need to continue. There are letters to write, decisions to make, a household to manage. Margaret rises and begins another day, carrying her worries quietly, showing the world only competence and determination. September brings the harvest, the culmination of the year's agricultural work. At each Paston manor, grain is cut and gathered, assessed and stored. The bailiffs tally the yields and report to Margaret. This year has been good, thanks be to God. The stores will see them through the winter comfortably. Margaret includes these details in her letter to John. Amid all the legal troubles and political uncertainties, the land continues to produce. Whatever happens with Fastolf's estate, they still have their original properties, still have the foundation William Paston built. On a clear autumn afternoon, Margaret rides out to visit one of their more distant manors. The countryside is beautiful in this season, fields golden with stubble, trees beginning to attain color, the air crisp and clay. For a moment, riding through this peaceful landscape with only her servants for company, she can almost forget the complications waiting in Norwich, the threats lurking in London, the powerful enemies who covet what the Pastons have claimed. But only for a moment. At the manor, there are matters requiring her attention. A dispute between tenants. Repairs needed to a barn roof before winter. questions about next year's planting. She dismounts and turns her attention to these practical concerns, pushing larger worries aside. This is the pattern of her days. Moments of peace punctuated by constant demands, brief respites between waves of responsibility. She manages it all with the same steady competence, never complaining, never faltering, the anchor that holds the family secure. The winter of 1461 settles over Norfolk with its familiar cold. But this winter brings an unexpected visitor to the Paston household, a young man named Richard Caille, who has entered their service as a bailiff and estate manager. Richard Caille is capable and hardworking, exactly the sort of servant the Pastons need. He rides between their various properties, collecting rents, overseeing repairs, ensuring that the family's business affairs run smoothly. Margaret comes to rely on him, trusting his judgment and his diligence. What no one yet realizes is that young Marjorie Paston, the daughter of the house, has begun to notice Richard Caille as something more than a servant. But this is a story that will unfold slowly, secretly, over years to come. For now, the household continues its winter routines. In the evenings, the family gathers in the hall for supper. The fire burns bright against the cold. Servants bring bread and pottage, meat pies and ale. Conversation flows quietly, news from London, discussion of estate matters, plans for the coming spring. Margaret presides over the household with her usual efficiency. She ensures that everyone is fed, that the servants know their duties, that the younger children are properly supervised. Even in these domestic moments, she is always managing, always attentive. After supper, as the household begins to settle for the night, Margaret retreats to her chamber to write. By candlelight, she composes another letter to John, her quill moving steadily across the parchment. Right worshipful and well-beloved husband, I recommend me to you. I have received your letter, and I am glad to know that you are in good health. As for matters here, Richard Caille has collected the rents at Spall and reports that all is well there. The tenants at Mortby have paid what they owe, save for one who pleads poverty, and I have given him until Lady Day to make payment. She continues with other details, a dispute settled, supplies purchased, plans for repairs when the weather improves. Then, more personally, I pray you come home as soon as your business permits, for the children ask daily when their father will return, and I confess I would be glad of your counsel on several matters that trouble me. She seals the letter and sets it aside for the morning messenger. Then she sits for a moment in the quiet, listening to the house settle around her, distant footsteps, doors closing, the wind outside the shuttered windows. These solitary moments are rare for Margaret, and perhaps welcome. All day she is surrounded by servants, children, visitors, petitioners. But here, in the candlelit stillness, she can simply be, not managing, not deciding, not performing the role of lady of the household. January becomes February, and still John does not return from London. The legal battles over Fastolf's estate continue, complicated and expensive. Margaret writes that she understands the necessity but hopes it will be resolved soon. The household expenses continue regardless of John's absence. Servants must be paid. Food must be purchased. Buildings need maintenance. Margaret manages it all from the funds John sends, but she worries about the mounting costs of the legal proceedings. On a cold February morning, Margaret receives a visitor, her mother-in-law, Agnes Paston, now quite elderly but still formidable. Agnes has her own properties to manage, but she keeps a close eye on her son's affairs and is not shy about offering opinions. They sit together in the solar, two women who have each spent decades managing the complexities of gentle life. Agnes asks pointed questions about the estates, about the children's education, about John's progress with the Fastolf inheritance. Margaret answers carefully. She respects her mother-in-law but is also her own woman now, the lady of her own household. They speak as equals, two estate managers comparing notes, sharing concerns, offering each other the hard-won wisdom of experience. You are doing well, Agnes says finally, a rare compliment. Managing so much in John's absence is not easy work. But remember, never let the servants think you are uncertain. They must see strength, always strength, even when you doubt. Margaret nods. She has learned this lesson well. Whatever her private worries, the household sees only competence and authority. March brings the first signs of spring, longer days, warming air, the earliest flowers pushing through the cold earth. The household begins to emerge from winter's confinement. Windows are opened to air out rooms. Servants begin the thorough cleaning that marks the season's change. Margaret oversees the work, checking that carpets are properly beaten, that linens are washed and aired, that the winter's accumulation of soot and dust is properly removed. A well-kept house reflects on the family's status, and nothing escapes her attention. News arrives that John will finally return home in April. Margaret feels relief wash over her, though she maintains her composed exterior. She has managed well in his absence. She knows this, but she will be glad to share the burden again, to have his counsel on the decisions she has been making alone. She prepares for his return. His chamber must be made ready, fresh rushes laid on the floors, favorite dishes planned for his homecoming meal. The household stays with anticipation. The master returning always changes the rhythm of daily life. On a mild April day, John Paston finally rides through the gates. The household turns out to greet him. Margaret stands in the doorway, watching her husband dismount, noting that he looks older, more tired than when he left. They embrace formally, as befits a gentleman and his lady, but there is warmth in the gesture. However difficult their separation, they are partners in the truest sense, bound by shared purpose and mutual dependence. That evening, after supper, they sit together in the solar, reviewing everything that has happened during his absence. Margaret shows him the account books, explains the decisions she made, reports on each property's condition. John listens carefully, asking occasional questions, nodding approval at her management. Then he tells her of London, the legal proceedings, the political maneuvering, the exhausting work of defending their claims while seeking powerful allies. "We are like men trying to hold sand," he says quietly. "The more we grasp, the more seems to slip through our fingers." Fastolf's relatives grow bolder. The Duke of Norfolk makes no secret of wanting Caister. "And the costs? Margaret, the costs are becoming more than I know how to bear." Margaret considers her response carefully. "We have survived worse," she says finally. "Your father started with nothing and built all of this. Whatever happens with Fastolf's estate, we still have what is truly ours. We will endure." It is meant as reassurance, but they both know the truth is more complicated. The family has risen high, perhaps higher than their power can sustain. And in the turbulent world of 15th century England, those who rise highest risk falling furthest. As night falls over Norwich, the household settles into sleep. In their chamber, John and Margaret rest side by side, each carrying their own worries, their own hopes. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, as every day does. But for tonight, there is peace. The house is quiet. The children sleep safely in their beds. The estates continue their cycle of seasons and harvests. And the Paston family endures, as they always have, through patience, work, and unwavering determination. The spring and summer of 1462 pass in the familiar rhythm of estate management and legal maneuvering. John divides his time between Norfolk and London, always pursuing the elusive security of the Fastolf inheritance. Margaret continues her steady work at home, the anchor that keeps the family grounded. The children grow older, each year bringing them closer to the marriages and careers that must be arranged. Young John, the eldest son, continues at court, still spending more than his parents approve but making connections that may someday prove valuable. The second son, also named John but known to history as John III, shows more promise of following his grandfather's diligent example. He studies law, writes careful letters, and seems to understand that the family's position requires constant vigilance and work. Marjorie, the daughter who has been learning household management from her mother, continues to grow into young womanhood. Her parents begin serious discussions about her marriage. Several families have expressed interest, alliances that could strengthen the Paston's position or bring valuable connections. What Margaret and John do not know is that their daughter has already given her heart elsewhere, to Richard Caille, the capable bailiff who manages their estates. But Marjorie keeps this secret carefully hidden, knowing her parents would never approve a match between their daughter and a servant, no matter how trusted. In the long summer evenings, life at the manor takes on an almost peaceful quality. The children play in the courtyard. Servants tend the gardens. The smell of baking bread drifts from the kitchen. For brief moments, it is possible to forget the legal battles, the powerful enemies, the constant uncertainty. Margaret sits in the garden on a warm June afternoon, a basket of mending beside her. Her hands move automatically, stitching a torn hem, while her mind turns over the various concerns that never quite leave her: rents that need collecting, repairs that need making, letters that need writing. A servant approaches with a question about the evening meal. Margaret answers without looking up from her wake. Everything continues in its ordered way, each person knowing their role, each task completed in its proper time. But beneath this surface calm, tensions are building. The Duke of Norfolk grows more aggressive in his claims to Caister Castle. Other rivals challenge the Pastons' right to various properties, and the political situation in England remains volatile, with loyalties shifting and old certainties crumbling. John writes from London with increasing worry: "We are surrounded by enemies, some open and some hidden. I fear that our possession of Caister cannot be maintained much longer against such a powerful adversary. Yet to surrender it would be to admit defeat and invite further challenges to all we hold." Margaret reads this letter with a heavy heart. She has always been the practical one, the voice of caution, but even she can see that they are caught in an impossible situation. To fight requires resources they barely have. To yield invites destruction of everything they have built. September 1462 brings the harvest, and for a few weeks, the pressing concerns of politics and inheritance fade before the immediate work of bringing in the crops. This is the ancient rhythm that underlies everything. The land produces, people labor, food is gathered against the coming winter. Margaret walks through fields of cut grain, golden stubble crunching beneath her feet. Workers load wagons with sheaves of wheat and barley. The bailiff records each load, keeping the careful tallies that will determine the year's income. This, at least, is solid and real. Whatever happens with legal battles and noble enemies, the land remains. The crops grow. The livestock multiply. The basic work of survival and sustenance continues, as it has for centuries, as it will for centuries more. As autumn deepens into winter, the family gathers for the season's traditional celebrations. All Saints' Day brings prayers for the dead, for William Paston, for Fastolf, for all who have gone before. The living remember those who built what they now struggle to maintain. In the chapel, candles flicker before images of saints. The priest intones prayers in Latin, his voice rising and falling in the ancient rhythms. The Paston family kneels together, John and Margaret, their children, the senior servants. For this moment, they are united in devotion, in memory, in hope. December brings Advent and the approach of Christmas. Despite all their worries, the Pastons maintain the proper celebrations. The hall is decorated. Special foods are prepared. Gifts are exchanged. For these holy days, they set aside, as much as possible, the concerns that plague them the rest of the year. On Christmas Eve, the household gathers for the evening meal. Candles illuminate the hall. The fire burns bright and warm. There is laughter, music, a sense of community that transcends the usual hierarchies of master and servant. Margaret looks around at her family. Her husband, aging but still determined. Her children, growing into their own futures. The servants who have become part of the household's life. Whatever troubles await, they have this moment. They have each other. But even in celebration, Margaret's mind turns to the future. What will the new year bring? Will they finally secure the Fastolf inheritance, or lose it forever? Will their powerful enemies be satisfied with taking Caister, or will they pursue the Pastons' other properties as well? As 1462 draws to a close and 1463 approaches, the Paston family stands at a crossroads. They have climbed so high from William Paston's peasant origins, but the higher one climbs, the more perilous the fall. John and Margaret know that the coming years will test them as never before. Legal battles will intensify. Political dangers will multiply. Their children will make choices that will shape the family's future, some wise, some perhaps less so. And through it all, the letters will continue, hundreds upon hundreds of them, carrying news and instructions, worries and hopes, the intimate details of daily life across the miles and years. These letters, preserved by fortune, will allow people centuries later to witness this family's struggles and triumphs. But on this winter night in 1462, the Pastons do not know they will be remembered. They know only that they must continue, managing their estates, defending their claims, raising their children, maintaining their position in a world that offers no certainty and no rest. Margaret finishes her evening tasks and climbs the stairs to her chamber. Tomorrow will bring new challenges. It always does. But she has faced every day until now with competence and courage, and tomorrow will be no different. John sits by the fire a while longer, reviewing documents by candlelight. There are always documents, deeds to study, letters to answer, legal arguments to construct. The work never ends, but he has never expected it to. This is the price of ambition, the cost of rising above one's birth. Outside, the winter night deepens over Norfolk. In cottages and manor houses across the county, other families settle into sleep. The world turns, seasons change, generations rise and fall. And through it all, the patient work of living continues. The story of the Paston family is far from over. In the years ahead, they will face even greater challenges, sieges and separations, betrayals and triumphs, love matches that defy parental authority, and political upheavals that shake the kingdom. But that is a story for another time. For now, let us leave the Pastons as they settle into the winter of 1462, surrounded by their uncertainties and their determination, bound together by blood and shared purpose, ready to face whatever the new year may bring. Sleep now, and know that the medieval world continues its turning, with all its complexity and humanity, its struggles and small victories. The Pastons endure, as they always have, one day at a time, one letter at a time, one generation building upon the wake of the last. And so we close this chapter of the Paston family's daily life. But their story continues, through trials and tribulations, through joy and sorrow, through all the years that lie ahead in the turbulent 15th century. Part 2 coming soon.